Imagine walking into a cave so dark and deep that no light has touched it in thousands of years. You're probably the only human ever to have walked there from a historical standpoint, or at least you thought so. Then you start to notice something strange on the ground, something that closely resembles bones, dozens of them. They are not animals or apes, but humans. As you're about to discover, these bones belong to a hominin species we thought never even existed, at least not according to our timelines, our brains, or the clean linear story we've told ourselves about how we came into existence. We've got plenty of tales narrating humanity's origins, from the myth of Adam and Eve to scientifically grounded explanations. Still, the very existence of this being fits none of them. This is the story of Homo Naledi, a human ancestor with the hands of a climber, the brain of a chimpanzee, and the mind of maybe something more. In 2013, near Marapane, South Africa, close to Johannesburg, two cavers exploring the Rising Star Cave system stumbled into a narrow vertical shaft, barely 20 cm and wide in some places. Past this small corridor was a chamber filled with bones. As they entered this part of the cave, they soon realized these weren't animal remains. They were human-like, and there were a lot of them. The scientists called in reinforcements, a team of 6 female, only paleoanthropologists, all small enough to fit through the claustrophobic cave system, who were lowered down and began excavating. What they found was beyond anyone's expectations. The Rising Star Cave ended up containing the largest bone gathering ever unearthed in Africa to this day, representing 15 individuals from over 1,500 bone fragments, a species nobody had ever seen before. They called it Homo Naledi, with Naledi meaning star in the Sotho language, after the cave where it was found. But this wasn't a star rising. It was a ghost emerging from the shadows of our evolutionary past that we were yet to examine. And honestly, it only led to more questions. First, let's focus on the remains themselves. Homo Naledi didn't quite fit the script of typical hominins. It had long, curved fingers perfect for swinging through trees similar to monkeys. But its wrists and thumbs were surprisingly human, built for precise, controlled movement. The thumbs were robust, and the palms strong, capable of gripping tools, even though no tools were found with them. The hands are basically a paradox, climbing hands with a craftsman's grip. Its arms were long, almost disproportionately so, suggesting strong climbing capabilities, but its legs told a different story. These were striders' legs with long femurs, human-like knees, and feet with well-developed arches, indicating they were upright walkers without a doubt. The toes were slightly curved, hinting at a retained ability to grasp, maybe for balance or climbing. The rest of the foot was unmistakably designed for bipedal locomotion. The spine, too, was curved in the S shape we associate with upright posture. Then there's the rib cage, which was conical and flared like that of Australopithecus, more ape-like than human, possibly housing a larger gut suited for digesting raw plant matter or fibrous foods. The pelvis matched the same pattern, wide, flared, and primitive, not like ours, but more like something out of the deeper past. Closer to Lucy than to us. The skull presented the biggest puzzle of all, one we're still trying to solve. The cranial capacity was shockingly small, between 465 and 610 cubic centimeters, which is 1/3 the size of a modern human brain, and smaller even than some chimpanzees. Yet, the shape of the skull was deceptively modern, rounded in ways that suggested advanced development. The frontal and parietal regions, areas associated with planning, decision making, and possibly even symbolic thinking, were more developed than expected for a creature with such a small brain. Its face was a mixture of old and new features, a pronounced brow ridge, sloping forehead, and no chin, but the teeth were surprisingly modern, with small molars and simple roots, showing no sign of heavy chewing or dietary specialization. The jaw sat somewhere between primitive and advanced, sturdy but not massive, more early Homo than ape. Size-wise, they were small. Adults stood around 1.44 to 1.5 meters tall, roughly 4'8" inches to 4 feet 11 inches, and weighed about 40 to 50 kilograms. Curiously, unlike many of our extinct cousins, Homo naledi showed low sexual dimorphism, meaning males and females were roughly the same size, suggesting a social structure that might have been more cooperative than hierarchical. Where Homo naledi truly gets interesting is in the realm of physical performance, strength, endurance, and raw capacity. Based on bone morphology and muscle attachment sites, their grip strength has been estimated at 70 to 90 kilograms of force per hand. That's well beyond the average modern human's grip strength, which usually falls between 45 and 55 kilograms. In fact, Homo naledi likely matched or even exceeded elite modern rock climbers and gymnasts in this metric, putting them on par with pound-for-pound primate strength levels, just below chimpanzees, who can exhibit grip forces 2 to 3 times stronger than us. Their upper body strength was equally impressive. Based on estimated muscle torque and shoulder architecture, their peak pulling force likely reached around 400 to 500 newtons. In human terms, that's the kind of strength needed to do multiple pull-ups with added weight, or to scale vertical surfaces, using only upper body power. They could almost certainly lift their own body vertically and repeatedly, which makes sense for a species still adapted to navigating steep, rocky terrain and potentially dense forest canopies. When it came to carrying loads, Homo naledi was no slouch either, likely managing 20 to 30% of their body weight, somewhere around 10 to 15 kilograms over distances. That's the equivalent of a modern backpacker or a mountain porter, but achieved with fewer breaks and greater terrain versatility. It's important to note that these estimates aren't just theoretical, they're grounded in biomechanical modeling drawn from fossils, primate comparisons, and the performance of modern small-bodied endurance athletes. Speaking of endurance, Homo Naledi wasn't just strong, they were built to last. Their VO2 max, a measure of aerobic capacity, is estimated to fall in the range of 50 to 55 milliliters per kilogram per minute. For reference, a sedentary modern adult averages around 35, recreational athletes hover around 50 to 60, while elite marathoners and cyclists may reach 70 or even 80 plus. So while Naledi wouldn't compete in the Tour de France, they would very likely outperform the average modern human in an endurance hike over uneven terrain, especially with a load on their back and limited food. Their daily walking range was also impressive. Anatomical studies of their pelvis and femurs suggest they could comfortably travel 15 to 25 kilometers per day, equivalent to the daily range of modern day hunter gatherers like the Hadza or Kung people. In contrast, most modern sedentary humans walk less than 5 kilometers daily. In other words, Homo Naledi could easily cover 4 to 5 times the ground we typically do today. And they did it without hiking boots, Gore-Tex, or ergonomic hydration packs. Despite all this output, their metabolic needs were relatively modest. Their smaller body size and slower developmental pace meant their basal metabolic rate, the number of calories needed at rest, was likely between 100 and 300 calories per day. Factoring in movement, foraging, and climbing, their total daily energy expenditure likely hovered between 800 and 300 calories per day. That's about the same as a moderately active adult human, but used far more efficiently. Naledi could run lean on calories, making them highly resilient in times of scarcity. Thanks to their large gut volume, suggested by the flared rib cage, they could likely digest tough, fibrous plant material, raw tubers, and maybe even insects or bark. They didn't necessarily need cooked food to survive, though recent evidence from Rising Star Cave does hint at possible fire use. Either way, they were metabolic survivors capable of handling low nutrient diets that would wear down a modern stomach. They wouldn't beat you in a sprint or win a decathlon, but they'd outclimb, outhake, and outlast most of us day after day on rough terrain with fewer calories and less rest. It's as if evolution pulled traits from every chapter of our story, some from the deep past, others seemingly from the future, and stitched them together into one strange, resilient body. The real kicker, as carbon dating would soon reveal, was that this wasn't a relic from 2 million years ago, nor was it a prototype. This was something else entirely, a small-brained, tree, climbing, tool-capable, upright walker with chimp-like strength, hunter-like endurance, and a calorie footprint lower than a school kid, living not in some forgotten corner of the past, but right alongside early modern humans. This was a ghost of deep time, hiding in the age of modern humans. Here's where things get really strange. The Naledi chamber, the room where most of these remains were found, is deep, very deep into the cave. To get there, you need to navigate a jagged vertical chute called the Superman Crawl, because only someone skinny enough to slide through with one arm forward can make it. Imagine these people weren't equipped like we are now, so they most probably navigated in the dark or, at best, with torches, which is far from ideal for such a narrow space. There's no light down there, no running water, and no sign of predator activity or natural disasters that could have moved the bones. No other animals were found, just Homo Naledi. How did all these individuals end up in the same remote, lightless chamber? The most plausible explanation is that they were placed there purposefully by other Homo Naledi. In other words, they were burying their dead, and not just once, as the remains represent multiple individuals from different times. This wasn't random, it suggests ritual and intention, because you don't move people into such a space unless they are most probably dead. But that raises another question. If Homo Naledi had brains this small, how could they possibly understand death, let alone develop ritual behavior? Until this discovery, scientists believed only large-brained humans like Neanderthals or Homo sapiens had the cognitive horsepower for symbolic thought. Scientists weren't even entirely sure that Neanderthals were capable of such symbolism. Homo Naledi challenges that assumption. Maybe brain size wasn't everything. Perhaps how the brain was wired mattered more. And maybe it still matters more today. Even now, some animal species exhibit signs of grief, social memory, or even rudimentary mourning. Elephants revisit the bones of their dead when they get the chance, or on anniversary dates or time periods. Crows gather and watch silently when one of their own dies, like a final guard of honor. Could Homo Naledi have possessed some form of early spirituality? Or were they simply disposing of corpses instinctively to avoid disease? We don't know. Unfortunately, no signs of paintings or long-lasting traces of other types of rituals were found in the Naledi part of the cave. Either answer changes how we see ourselves and redefines the boundaries of what constitutes a human, or more precisely, a hominin. If creatures with such tiny brains could navigate deep cave systems and return repeatedly to a hidden burial site, then intelligence isn't what we thought it was. It was actually much more developed. But we're not quite done with the surprises. Here's the real kicker. For years, scientists believed these fossils must be ancient. Even though they presented some modern human traits, a good part of their anatomy was still close to our ape relatives, suggesting an age of maybe 2 million years old, from a time when many primitive species still roamed Africa. In 2017, however, dating techniques delivered a shocking and unexpected revelation. The bones were just 236,000 to 335,000 years old. In evolutionary terms, that's practically yesterday. To be more precise, during that time period, Earth was home to at least 4 other Homo species, aside from Homo sapiens and Naledi. Sapiens and Naledi were actually contemporaries, as our earliest direct ancestors have been dated back to 300,000 years ago. Found in Morocco at the site of Jabal Ehud, while Naledi could have survived up until 236,000 years ago. To add to the astonishing news, they were actually on the same continent, unlike Neanderthals or Denisovans, who were mostly at present in Europe and Asia. While our ancestors were crafting tools, painting cave walls, and beginning the long journey towards civilization, Homo Naledi was still climbing trees and placing their dead in caves. The implications are massive. What if other evolutionary paths would have been possible for us? What would have become of Naledi if given enough time? In any case, it's clear now that we weren't alone. Other human species weren't just ancient relics. They were much closer than we initially thought. Neighbors, really. For decades, the human origin story was depicted as a straight ladder, progressing step by step. First Lucy, who belongs to Australopithecus afarensis, then Homo habilis, Homo erectus, possibly Homo heidelbergensis, and finally us. But the truth happens to be more like a forest than a straight path, a mess, a beautiful chaos. Multiple human species existed at the same time. They weren't just before us, they were with us. Homo Naledi throws fuel on that fire. It's not the only one in this case, as Homo erectus also survived well past the first signs of Homo sapiens appearance on this planet. What's really surprising here is the build of Naledi, which has very archaic, almost monkey-like characteristics. If such a species survived until just 250,000 years ago, then how many others walked alongside us unnoticed in the shadows? We already know about Neanderthals and Denisovans, but could there be more species we haven't even found yet? In this context, what happened to all of them? Are they actually the foundations of some of our weirdest psychological mechanisms, such as the famous uncanny valley? Did we mix with them, or did we have a reason to fear the ones resembling us, but not exactly like us? Our planet has countless caves, valleys, and layers of rock that remain unexplored. We may just be scratching the surface of our own family tree. But back to Naledi, what happened? The truth is, like in most cases, we don't know. There's no evidence of violence, no catastrophic event, and no clue in the fossils. Maybe they were outcompeted, pushed out by more adaptable, tool-savvy humans like us, Homo heidelbergensis, or Homo erectus. Maybe climate change slowly cut off their food supply or habitats as forests tended to retreat more inland. Or maybe, just maybe, they interpret to the point of being fully absorbed into other human populations. It's not unheard of. We know modern humans carry DNA from Neanderthals and Denisovans, which definitely implies interbreeding. Could there be traces of Homo Naledi in us? It's a possibility, as around 80% of our DNA is somewhat uncoded. We just don't know what it does or its purpose. There's even a notion estimating that we are all composed of phantom ancient hominin DNA. potentially up to 10 to 20% in some populations, but fragmented and often untraceable. So far, we haven't found any genetic material related to this, though the bones were discovered in an environment not ideal for DNA preservation. We're still looking, and science makes progress every day. If one day we do find a match, it would mean that the species that seemingly shouldn't have existed never really left. We like to believe we're unique, and there's a lot to support that idea, from each person's desire for individuality to large-scale systems like religion suggesting humanity has a special place in the universe, for example through geocentrism. We believe our intelligence, rituals, and empathy set us apart from the rest of the animal world, and even from our cousins. But maybe those traits run deeper. Maybe they've been bubbling under the surface of evolution for longer than we knew. And perhaps we're not the only ones to have exhibited such traits. If Homo Naledi really did understand death, if they had community, memory, and belief, then we're not necessarily the pinnacle of evolution. We're just one branch of a much older, more complex tree, carrying more echoes than we think. The discoveries made in this cave necessitate a revision of our very place in the evolutionary tree. There isn't one single path, and there certainly wasn't just one hominin species after another on this planet. Life always finds a way, but this one was unexpected, to say the least, by its sheer existence and characteristics. Let's recap. In 2013, scientists discovered a mysterious set of bones in a deep, pitch-black cave in South Africa belonging to the species Homo Naledi, previously unknown to science. They had small brains and primitive features, but possibly sophisticated behaviors. They lived just 250,000 years ago, alongside early modern humans. Evidence suggests they buried their dead intentionally in total darkness, challenging everything we thought we knew about what it means to be human. The rising star cave remains quiet now, as it has been for the past 300,000 years or so, serving as the resting place chosen by Homo Naledi, or at least one population of Naledi. But the questions it raised echo louder than ever. What if we're not the only ones who mourned or had an understanding of symbolism? What we thought was our advantage compared to other hominins, such as Neanderthals, maybe isn't that unique. For a long time, it was thought that symbolism helped us regroup into bigger populations, eventually building villages and cities because we had culture and religion that maintained and enabled the coexistence of many people in one place. Even though nature didn't initially build us to be so packed together. What if intelligence isn't just about the size of your skull, but the wiring of it? Kind of like software over hardware. What if what matters most is the depth of your soul? As time passes, more discoveries of human, like bones, are made at different sites throughout the world, like the Red Deer Cave people, the Denisovans, and many more we thought couldn't exist until a few years back. Homo Naledi was never supposed to exist, but it did, and now it will never be forgotten. If you're fascinated by the forgotten chapters of human and overall history, subscribe to Echoes of Extinction. And don't forget to hit that notification bell. Also, don't hesitate to comment on our videos. We'd love to hear more of your feedback. There's a whole world of lost species, ancient rituals, and impossible stories waiting to be uncovered. While we work on delivering them to you, keep listening to the echoes.